All right, everyone, delighted to see you today. We are honored. We have Shimshon Weiss with us and Omer, who are both looking at possibly becoming a chair. James, good morning, good afternoon. Glad to have you with us here. And we are also very honored to have my dear friend of many years, Janet Boudreau out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She has been a Vistage chair for a number of years. She built a national company from the ground up for some 28 years. And one very unique thing about Janet, and that is, gentlemen, we are in the presence of a movie star. I'm serious. She just starred in a movie, and I
Oh,
just watched it the other night, and she is phenomenal. So if you want to make a note, if you want to download the movie, it's called He, She, and Me. He slash she and me. Amir, we're so glad you're joining us. And
hey.
I'm talking about our guest, Janet, who is a movie star in addition to being an award winning Vistage chair. So, again,
Wow.
if you want to download her movie, seriously, just go to Vimeo, and go look for He slash she and me. She is the only star of that 1 hour and 7 minute movie, and she carries it off beautifully. Well, wait a minute. Her dog is the co-star, does a fine job, but mostly she carries the program. And I was just absolutely moved by watching her movie. And
Thank,
she is giving you the connection right there. Is that right, Janet? The
Yeah.
details
I,
in the
I
chat.
did. But let me tell you though, this is to rent it from the theater that produced it, and there is a discount code or a promo code that the word is discount for, so you get it for $10 instead of 20. But uh, if we're looking at, you can also email the theater to get it for nothing. And
Well,
considering that you may not be able to pay in dollars, that might be the way to go. I think they'd be thrilled to know that people might be watching it in Israel.
what was the
There
name of
you
the
go.
movie again? He, she.
He, she, and
He,
me. You can go to that link and you can watch a little trailer first before you decide to watch it
yeah,
and read a
yeah. The
little
title is
bit.
actually He / she and me. But Janet, you were spectacular in that movie. I was really moved. Just fabulous. So we are in the presence of an award-winning Vistage chair and a movie star. But in the final analysis, my dear friend, Janet, we're delighted that you're spending time with us today.
Glad to be here. I'm really excited that Vistage looks like you'll be expanding into Israel. Fantastic. You guys
Absolutely.
have
So
a good
Janet,
work.
please tell everyone a little bit about your background. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Seattle, Washington originally, and moved all the way across country about 30 years ago. Yeah. So my then husband became a professor at Duke, and that was the reason for the move. I said, boy, we better stop or we'll hit water again. Yeah.
And so did you all move to Chapel Hill when you moved across country or where?
Oh, Durham originally, but then we found a wonderful home on an acre on a creek. So I've been living in this home for just over 30 years. Love it here. In fact, that is the movie set. You will see every room in my modernist home. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful home. You do get to see it, and the scenery is amazing. The creek in the back, the water, everything. And so, Janet, tell us what you did throughout the years. You built a company up. Tell everybody about your background.
I did. I actually have a geology degree and was going to work in industry, but my husband was headed for academia. He was in geology also. And when we had a child, I thought, no time like the present to switch careers, because couples in geology who have one in academia and the other in industry, they don't spend much time together. And we didn't want a life like that. So I took over my family's fledgling company. There were 3 products and 10 customers in one state. And I bought it for $1. And that's about all it was worth. When I looked at the tax returns, it was founded in 1971. And from 71 to 87, the highest revenue he ever did was $13,000. And that wasn't profit, that was total revenue. So I decided, okay, I'm staying home with my baby. I can take my time to build this up. And I got all of my wonderful product ideas from my customers. And that proved to be the formula for almost 30 years of success. That was the foundation. So I built an election supply and voting equipment company. And if you're familiar with the I voted sticker, I popularized that iconic image of I voted and the flag. Maybe you see it even over there, but that's my little claim to fame. Yeah, so
Wow.
we ended up
Wow.
doing some international business, all 50 states, and ended, I sold it in 2015. And by that point, we had over 1,000 products. Whoop,
Amazing.
whoop.
All dealing with voting type things. What were the products?
All supplies and equipment, security items, everything from hands-on things like ballot boxes, transfer cases, voting booths, to security seals, barcode scanners, uh, you name it. Yeah, signs, a lot of different signs.
Wow. Wow. And you mentioned you have a family, Janet? You have kids?
I do. I have a 33-year-old son who lives across the country in Portland, Oregon, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
and I've been seeing Jerry here for 6.5 years. My husband and I parted in 2013. Yeah.
And when did you get involved with Vistage?
Um, Less than a year after I sold the company. You know, I took some time to think about what I wanted to do, what I loved about running the business and what I didn't. And I worked with a coach to determine what would not feel like work, what would just feel like a blessing every day. And that was working with really smart people, developing them not just with their business goals, but the people who enter my group are also focused on a very full life, one leaning toward legacy and meaning, significance. Um, People who use money as a tool, the building of their business as a tool to better the lives of their employees and their community. A lot of them have a lot of charity work that's going on. Now, not every group is like this. Um, Boaz, you know, you visit groups. Every group has its own flavor. So some are all about, you know, 10x every year. We grow, we do, but the focus is on goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Janet, before I ask you another question, I just want you all to know Anita's joining us from the west coast of the US this time. She's in the US for another few days and then coming back to you all in Israel. So she's joining us from there. I'm in Dallas, and Janet is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And so, Janet, what was initially that got you interested in becoming a chair? When you were looking at it first, what got you interested in possibly becoming a chair?
Well, I was interested actually in becoming an executive coach, sort of a hybrid of a life coach and an executive coach. Um, my approach to chairing is very much a blend of personal business and health. I've found that over the years I was leading the company, there were years when things were going absolutely haywire, with an aging parent who lived to almost 100, to my son developing brain tumors multiple times, to, you know, marriage being strained, all sorts of things, and my own health, surgeries. So it's a three-legged stool that can teeter, and you can't be a decent leader without um, help keeping all that balanced. So I was leaning toward being an executive coach, and I was looking at certification programs. And Vistage usually finds people who sold their companies pretty quickly, but I found them first. And I was very attracted to the model because it included the one-on-one coaching, which I would find very rewarding and have, but it also involved them leading one another, sharing their wisdom. And I thought that group dynamic, if I could shape it properly, would be rewarding for all, and indeed it is. The other thing that appealed to me was the training that Vistage provides. not just from the outset, but in an ongoing way. You'll be part of a chair community and you can hone one another's skills. If you're really open and vulnerable with each other, you will get better much more rapidly. There are also seminars that they put on. There are webinars. There's so many resources for your members. You know, the Vistage motto is to keep getting better. And I believe that they live that from headquarters as well, providing a lot of new resources that are appropriate for the times and technology.
Yes,
Sound good?
Janet, before I ask you the next question, if I can have you just tilt slightly to your right. You know, I'm still directing for television. Because, no, not that far, because you're looking off camera to us. So if you could
Oh, you want me to look at this camera?
Yes, there
I
you
like
go.
to see your faces.
Thank
Okay.
you, thank you, thank you. But my director hat just tells me that we want to be able to look at you. You're wonderful.
Thank
And so Janet, how did you build your first group? How did you, gather the members for your first group?
How did I do it? Well, when I graduated from the training course, I found out from other chairs that there were 4 or 5 chair candidates who failed to build their groups before me. And I thought, well, I don't know what's going on in this market, but I'm going to succeed. It matters to me, and I think I have something to give. I can build a good group. And so I did. I did not have a lot of contacts in the regional business community because my business in elections I was very isolated. You can imagine I had basically one customer at every county level in every state and one customer at every state level. So I would go to state conferences, but I had virtually no contacts locally. So I could not fill my group with people I knew locally. So I checked that I got adept at using LinkedIn to find the type of people that I wanted. I joined the Chamber of Commerce and networked there. I developed referral partners with people who work with CEOs, attorneys, CPAs, insurance people. You get the picture. During training, they'll have exercises where you can brainstorm together about the different places that you can find the type of candidates that suit your type of group, whether it's chief executive, small business, key executive, or Vistage Inside.
Mm-hmm. And Janet, before we allow our chair candidates to ask you specific questions, I want to just relate to you in Israel, the culture, it's a little bit different. It's a small country, 8.5 million people, about the size of New Jersey, and everybody serves in the military, both men and women, which I think is a good thing. So a lot of people know each other, and people get advice at coffee shops and from friends and so forth. And so a question in Israel is, why should they pay the membership for Vistage? What is different about Vistage than it is about getting advice from a friend?
Friend. Okay, most people ask a little bit different question. And so let me answer the usual question, and then I'll answer that one. The usual question is, I have all kinds of advisors. I have an attorney, I have this, I have that, I have other people in the business world. But this is a trusted group of people who really get to know you, who have no vested interest in the advice that they give you or how you carry out what the advice is, other than they're interested in your success and well-being. That may be true for friends too. Friends may see you in a very limited way. For instance, my husband was a wonderful man, full of heart, steadfast, all that. But he was very risk averse. I would never have been able to grow a national company if I took his advice. So, friends are the same way. They see you a certain way. They may see you in a limited fashion. I think that if you think about it, you'll be able to expand on that. yourself. Two, you've heard the phrase, Boaz, you might be able to help me with this. You become as good as the 5 or 10 people that you spend the most time with.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in a business sense, if you want to get better, do you spend time with friends, or do you spend time with other business people who are also working to get better? Do you work within a trusted, long-term, regularly meeting group where the bond grows and how care grows? Part of solving challenges or really assessing opportunities, that part of the magic there is being able to tell it all, tell it like it is. Not wearing a little bit of a mask of being right or being the best. You know, if you're running a business, you're spending a lot of your time in the company of people who expect you to have all the answers all the time. And I think that a regular group of people who generally are expected to have all the answers all the time, it's a relief to go into a room and not be expected to have all the answers. So having regular meetings where you get to do that, it's working a different muscle than you do in your other business life or with friends. You're seen differently. You're on an equal standing in terms of,
Yes.
yeah.
It's a very unique atmosphere. And you have a CEO group and a key group, is that right? How many groups do you have?
I
Yeah.
have a CE group and a key group. We do have 2 chairs in this area with who are, I think, 81 and 82, and they're beginning to have some health troubles. So I'm reserving some bandwidth to take on one of their groups if need be, or temporarily even if they need.
And Janet has the most amazing spirit, and so do her members, because the group does run at the speed of a leader. So I'd like to go around the room and ask everyone if you have a question for Janet. And Nurit, I'd like to begin with you. You're moving, and we're so grateful that you even have a few minutes to spend with us today. And so any questions for Janet, Nurit, and then we'll go to Arnon. Any questions for her about Vistage and building groups?
There was something you said. Can you hear me? Yeah. There was something you said earlier. You said there was a difference between what people got initially and what they got later as a group member. I don't know if you remember that. You said something like that. You said that there was like a difference between the initial value and the later value. Can you go into that a little bit?
Oh, well, you can accelerate that. In training, they will do a great job in distinguishing for you a group of peers that acts more like a country club and just a social gathering, and a high-performing group. They will help you distinguish between those 2 things and give you leadership exercises and inclusion exercises that will help you to allow the members to open up to one another, to trust one another. You yourself need to set the standard and model the openness and vulnerability that is required to really create a high-performing group. You can accelerate that. So there's a difference. You can imagine if somebody is proposing an acquisition, say, I'd like you to review this and, you know, tell me if I'm on the right track. Well, you know, you can look at all the documents. You can review that. You can advise strategically on what a counteroffer might be, okay, or other questions that you might want to add to your due diligence. Those are all strategic, really surface level things. A really high performing group will ask things like, what for? They'll ask, how does this tie into your vision for legacy? If they can give a compelling answer, then that may help them craft a better offer. It may help them look more closely at the culture of that organization to see if they're able to achieve what they want to. It's not just a business decision. It's how does it fit in the overall vision of your life? You need people who understand that about you, who ask those really probing questions that you have to think about it. I sometimes stump the chump, you know, don't let's get over the questions that they can answer easily. Let's ask them the tougher questions. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Nurit, do you have a question for Janet? And then we'll go to Arnon. We cannot hear you, Nurit, yet. We're hoping we could. All right, perhaps you could put it in the chat. If you could type it into the chat, and we'll be happy to look at it. Arnon, do you have a question for Janet?
Yeah, sure. Janet, thank you for joining us. And coincidentally, I moved back to Israel 2 years ago after many years in Seattle myself. So I could definitely relate to having enough of the rain and water for sure. But it's a beautiful city. I think the question I had, and you know, the Vistage model is for obvious reasons that 8, 10, 12 members of the group, they each have to be from a different industry, again, for obvious reasons. But from your experience, how do you find that the different experiences transition from one industry to the other, where still people, you know, feel that they can bring value, even if, you know, their experience comes from a very different industry?
People ask this usually early in the process of the interviews. You need different perspectives to bust your thinking wide open. For instance, somebody who's doing e-commerce and heavy on digital marketing may have a different perspective on how to reach a customer base for somebody who has a retail shop. You need those different industries and different business models to bust the thinking open. I build my groups in other diverse ways, and my members are, they refer people into the group based on this too. It's very important to my group to have men and women in the group. An awful lot of Vistage groups are only men, and that does limit the thinking. You know, we've had some product and marketing ideas come up because we have a blend.
Yeah.
And it affects the women thinking differently too. Racial differences, I don't know how important that will be in Israel, but the other thing that I like to think about is people who, of course, this would be much more natural in Israel than it is here. I like to have people who have lived abroad or who were reared abroad. Yep. People who have a different culture in their bones also, they can think very differently. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it actually does. And I think, you know, part of that diversity is not just, like you said, different industries. It's also a different, you know, upbringing or different cultures. And again, there might be some limit to that here, as opposed maybe to the US. But I think, again, if we look hard enough, I think we can find it here as well.
Yeah.
Janet, Nurit has a question. Her audio isn't working at the moment, but she was wondering, what do people think that they get more value with being part of Vistage when they have their own board? Do you think that growth in the US in her area with women joining Vistage has been helpful? You mentioned that. But the question is about value, whether they use value from their own board at their company, or this becomes a different type of board. Am I right?
Very much. I have members in my group who have boards. You know, they're held by private equity or they're a nonprofit with a board. And that's a very different experience. You can't let it all hang out in front of your board. You're responsible for essentially being a really skilled know-it-all, right? This is a place where people hammer out their dilemmas. now other people have a group of advisors, but as I mentioned, some of those advisors are paid advisors, and they have a vested interest in you continuing to work with them. Their advice is colored by that. They also may have opinions and feelings about you taking the advice. So this is all advice that's untethered. You'll find is that Vistage has a really great core issues processing model. And there are offshoots of that I use too. These are proven methods to get down to the core problem. A lot of people come in with a how do I do this or how do I do that proposal. We call it an issue statement. And it's usually a symptom. Between 80 and 90% of the time, when we go through our issue processing model, the issue that they come to the group with, as refined as they think it is, when we go through this process of open-ended questions and nominations for restating the issue, 80, 85% of the time, it's a different issue that is ultimately solved. And one of our sayings is the issue named is, or the problem named is the problem solved. So it's really important to define the problem that you want to solve. And then the group gets to work on offering suggestions about how to tackle that. And usually you end up tackling something much larger and more significant. I think it takes a skilled facilitator, a trained facilitator, as you all will be, and a wise group to learn how to stick with a process, stick with withholding suggestions, stick with that open-ended question model to get to better problem solving, better decisions ultimately. It's really quite magical.
Yeah.
You don't get
And,
that from a group of friends.
No, not at all. And I've seen it so many times, having been around for 18 years with 1,800 meetings. The chair warns the person who brought the issue up not to make judgments at the beginning, to go through the entire process, to get feedback. Is that right, Janet? We don't
Yeah.
want judgments early in that process of making decisions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Amir, do you have questions? And then James?
Excuse me, I just have to say goodbye. I apologize. I have to go teach. Janet, it was a
Saul,
lovely
thank
meeting
you.
you. Great seeing everybody. I'll see you next time. Okay.
Thank you, Saul. Amir?
Hey, Janet.
Hi, I want to be sure before anyone else has to leave that I did have some thoughts before the next question. I want to be sure anybody can hear these. Should you all decide to move ahead with this, I would suggest that you jointly develop a business plan that is specific to Israel. You might want to build it before you go through training and then get together and modify it based on what you've learned. I also suggest talking to Vistage about being assigned mentor chairs. Vistage headquarters has gone back and forth on this over the years. Right now, they are in a mode of assigning mentor chairs to chair candidates who are building groups. I think that there's much greater chance of success if you have a mentor chair as well as a build coach. They will assign you a build coach at headquarters. It's very different working with an established practicing chair. They may not bring that up because they may not think it's a natural thing for you to be working with somebody else in another country, but I would recommend looking into that. So business plan, mentor chairs. I also highly suggest in training, they'll talk about a referral culture. They'll talk about chair collegiality. Sometimes in different markets, different chairs develop this, we're competing with one another for the attention of business owners, competing with one another for members. That always hurts a chair's success. It hurts members. If you can, from the start, build a collegiality, be dedicated to that, build a referral culture, it'll be for the good of all. I can say also in training, they will tell you, and I found this to be true, you may have a wealth of business contacts and you may think, I'm going to be fast building my group because all these people will join my group. I only know one chair who had people flock to him because of his contacts and his reputation. It seems to be quite true that the people you know right now who do respect you for what you've been doing, they are unlikely to join your group. I would suggest that you keep a very open mind. Do talk to those people. You may want them in your group, but if they also make it known early that you have other chairs that you can match them to confidently, whom you really respect. If you each do that for one another, you will build faster. Okay. Yeah, I think that's really important. Go ahead.
Janet, I think you just shared something immensely important. Anita and I are actually meeting with Sam Reese, you know, Sam, the CEO of Vistage Worldwide that some of you met at one of our first meetings. We're meeting with him today in a few hours, and I'm going to bring that up with him about the mentor chairs. I think it's an excellent point. How many of you by show of hands agree? That would be so valuable, where we tie each one of you into a successful coach and they mentor you. Oh my gosh, and the business plan is great. See why I love having Janet with us? My goodness, amazing. Amir, do you have questions for Janet?
Yes. Janet, hi. First of all, I really like the fact that you've stated that you're looking for people in your groups that are people driven by the desire to make an impact, and that definition itself creates a profile for the group. So I resonate with that. Two questions, please. One is, I'm curious for sort of like a private example or story of a sense of value for the group that you have experienced, where, you know, the numbers that are being spoken is doubling your business, but something that you have as a personal note about an experience of tremendous value that it brought to the group. And the second question is, you sort of like danced around the question of whether people give advice or don't give advice. I'm familiar with other models where giving advice is perceived as a psychological one-up, like I know better than you what's right for you in your business. So I'm curious about how you view that.
Oh, we do give advice. We call it suggestions, though. Okay, so let me answer the first question about value to the group.
Value to the individual.
Yes, okay. Let me make a note to myself. Okay. When you go through training, you will hear so many member stories about the value that each member has received from the group. And I have stories. For instance, after a year, one of my smaller engineering firm companies, they do about 3.5 million a year. He said, you know, I didn't see the 2.2 bump times revenue bump in a year. And people are going, oh, he said, but I doubled my profits. And everybody asked him how he did it. And he said, you know, I've been just racking my brain about that because it wasn't any one thing. I thought, oh, I got this from this speaker in terms of how to run my business differently. I got this from this speaker about hiring and firing. I got this from how to lead a little differently. So, and his family life is different because of the way he leads. It invades the rest of his life. And he brought issues to the group. That brought more value too. He was able to accelerate change and in the right direction, better decisions. And he said too that he just experienced a different ease in his days. He was more relaxed as a leader and more confident as a leader, having this peer group as a regular thing to turn to. So I have a million stories like that. When you're just starting out, you're using other chairs' stories. You're maybe using video testimonials from members, okay? You can use other tools from other chairs and other members. That's one reason I think having a mentor chair is important. Also, having a build coach who can point you to some of those resources so you can share actual member stories, because you won't have your own yet. I can go more into member stories, but it's monetary, it's confidence, it's better family relationships, it's launching better communication between within the company, changing the culture of the company. It's so many things, so many things. Giving advice, that was the second part of the question. We do give advice. People bring issues to the group. It can be personal or business. It's usually business with an overtone of personal. My motto is make us care. Tell us what's keeping you up at night. Tell us if your stomach's churning and why. Tell us what's giving you a headache. If you float on the surface of, you know, my revenue's dropping, or, you know, I have too much turnover in my organization, you can solve that. But in the group, you've got to make the other members care, create a sense of urgency. So you as a chair have to shape that, but you go through the issue processing model. I won't trouble you with all that, but the final part is that issue restatement. Every member has an opinion about, after hearing all the answers to the questions, they have an opinion about what is the core thing that you need to solve here. So that's where you get the issue restatement. And the member then chooses which one he or she is going to get suggestions on. We call it suggestions, and it's not a dialogue back and forth. What we say is a suggestion to solve your problem from your fellow members is a gift. And what do you say when you receive a gift? You say thank you. You can go offline and ask more details, but you get just this wonderful cascade of suggestions about what you might do next. And then the accountability part comes in. The member with the issue chooses which of these suggestions they want to take action on. And they commit to a timeline. Some of those might be before the next meeting. Some might roll out over 3 months. And the next month we have accountability review. So did I answer the question about giving advice?
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
James and then Jackie. James, a question for Janet.
Hi, Janet. Nice to meet you. Very impressed by your achievements. Congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
So I think a few things. I really liked your point with regards to non-competition, referral culture. I'm with Sandler, and we heavily believe in that type of that type of approach. I think there's so much abundance, there's enough business for everybody. I'd like to ask you, you mentioned something in the beginning, you said each group has its own flavor.
Yeah.
What is your group's flavor, and how do you know, because that's an interesting concept. Is the flavor basically a blend between who the chair is and the type of people that chair has recruited, or is it something that builds up over time, or is that something that you might have a vision in your own head at the beginning and kind of aim to? So that's my first question. And my second question, I think, you know, together with most people on this call, it's really about prospecting and getting those groups going. Age groups of the members, any millennials, kind of what did you find was easier to recruit? What did you find was more challenging yet more rewarding? I don't know.
Okay, let me answer the age question first. I do like it. That's an aspect of diversity that I think is very important. One of my favorite speakers next to Boaz is Gustavo Grabnitsky. And he talks about 5 generations in the workplace now. It's a fascinating talk, but I can say that it's not difficult to get great age diversity in your groups. My youngest member is 38. My oldest member is 63, 64. And that helps to bring in new approaches also, especially when it comes to employee issues and also employee development, building your bench, in communication and in work styles. It's fabulous to have a group full of different ages, and it's no harder to recruit one age group than the other. I haven't found any difference there at all. As far as the groups having different characters, different flavor, I think I may be less qualified to speak to this in an educated way than Boaz, but I hear this over and over and over from speakers. And it's not, I don't sense that there's a great judgment about one being better than the other. But it's, for instance, if you do Sandler training, you go into all these different companies and you can sense the culture difference within a company. So groups are very much like that. And the groups are very intimate. And so I think that the character is very evident even to a visitor of the group. So Boaz, maybe you can speak to this in a more educated way.
Absolutely. I think having been around 25,000 Vistage members in 18 years and have seen all types of chairs all over the world, making people feel safe, I think, is a key point, from the chair's standpoint. And Janet does this about as well as anybody in the world, to make people feel safe so they can share. They know everything is confidential here. And it's not going to go out of the room, and that everybody cares about each other. And that begins with the chair caring about them in a big way. And she does this beautifully. She makes people feel safe, and that creates a culture of her group. And she has some of the best the best spirit in her groups that I've seen of any groups in the world. So just fantastic. And it begins with her. James, does that answer your questions?
Super, thank you.
Okay, and Yagev and then Jackie. Yagev, you have a question for Janet?
Sure. Thank you, Boaz. Hi, Janet. I'm happy you're with us today. I really like your comments about collegiality and the referral process and a joint business plan. I think those are great ideas that we should discuss. I have two short questions. The first one, you said that people who know you are unlikely to join your group. And I was wondering why is that true? Because it sounds kind of counter-logical. I would guess that people who know you and trust you would be better candidates to join your group. So that's really not clear to me. And then you mentioned that when you started with this process, you had limited connections. And I was wondering, how did you get the first members on board when you had limited connections? What did you actually do?
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive that people who know you and respect you, perhaps as a consultant or for being a successful business person in the past, wouldn't join your group. But it may be different in Israel than it is here. But this is largely true here. As I said, I only know of one chair that has bucked that trend. I wish I were a psychologist who could speak to that. The one thing that they tell you in training, though, is that these people see you a certain way. And it takes a leap of faith to cast you in that role as their facilitator and their coach. They don't believe in you less, but they may not want to walk that road with you. I don't know. I think that would be a great question to delve into during training and to ask your build coach, who's probably seen it a million times. I am not one who had a lot of contacts who told me no, because I was so isolated in business for decades. But you may be able to talk to other chairs who had 1 million contacts and did face rejection in joining the group. But as I said, it may be very different in your country as a rule. I wouldn't take it as a given. And the second part of your question was building the group. I did mention you're developing referral partners with CPAs, attorneys, insurance people, all the people who serve CEOs, Chamber of Commerce, Mining LinkedIn. I also looked for in any small town near here or city, I looked for people who were highly connected, influential, of different ages. One of my founding members, for instance, is a young man. He was in his 30s when he joined the group, and he was taking over as 4th generation president for a hardware and lumber company that had grown massively, and they were right in the middle of town. This is a family that had so many connections over so many decades. It was over 100 years old. So between those generations, I knew that if he were in my group, he would have 1 million contacts. If he had a great experience, then that could influence the future of the group. So also look at members who have wide circles, who have a great reputation, who are highly respected and connected. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah, Janet, after you got the first 2 or 3 members signed up, did you not find that you would then be able to team up with them to have them help you to build a group with who they needed in the group? Am I right? Once you started signing up?
Yeah, that usually does work to varying degrees. And when you pick your founding members, you do not want any old warm body. Most of you have probably run companies or are running them now. You understand how you can influence your company culture. That's what you're doing. You're building your culture from the ground up. So if you want to build a culture of nominations, member nominations and referrals, set that as an expectation from the very start, that you're expecting them to, as they have a good experience, to contribute ideas about who else would be a great voice in the group. And consistently, especially in the early days, consistently revisit what other voice and expertise are we missing? For instance, very early on, we had employee questions that had a legal aspect to them. And very early on, people said, we need an HR specialist in here. I said, well, who do you know? Let me talk to them, or give me a warm introduction. That's the way to go. So don't settle for warm bodies early on. One thing I want to show, before you talk to Sam later, if you're going to talk about mentor chairs, one important aspect of being paired with a mentor chair is actually sitting in on meetings and seeing how it's done, seeing the group dynamic and how a chair facilitates. In the land of Zoom, that is so possible. It doesn't matter that we're an ocean apart. I am all for you being paired with other chairs.
I don't know about you all, but I'm getting a whole diamond mine worth of ideas here from Janet this morning. And Janet is amazing. Jackie, a question for Janet?
Yes. Hi, Janet.
Hi.
One quick thing, when you mentioned before that you don't use the word advice, but suggestions, it reminded me of the term, the worst form of vice is advice. So I like that. But I wanted to ask you about your groups. After a couple of years, how do you reinvigorate them? Because I'm assuming as people succeed and move on, their challenges change, their desires change, and you need to reinvigorate the group. How does that work?
So many ways. Okay. Just like I was a big fan of getting the best ideas from my customers when I had a company, if I noticed some energy flagging, I would, in a one-to-one, say, do you mind if we talk about the group for a minute? I'd really like your feedback on something. And for instance, I have a member who on the side does improv, right? And in training, you'll learn the value of assigning different roles. And one is historian. I use that. Another is, they call it timekeeper. I call it the meeting maestro. Another one is energizer bunny. So as an example, I said, energy tends to flag at this point of the day or after this. And, I'm interested in your ideas. And because he judges the interest and the energy of an audience. And he offered to do just a short improv exercise, to enliven things. So I will go to members and ask for that. Get your members from the very start to give you meeting feedback. They get an email on the day of the meeting and they're asked questions. It takes literally 60 to 90 seconds to do this, but you need that feedback and you need it every time. Most people will occasionally or regularly give you a few sentences that will help you hone the group and what they need and want. So you'll get input that way. You'll get input in the one-to-ones. You will get ideas from your fellow chairs. We call it a Vistage chair group, VCG. Those are super important. You will probably be paired with a best practice chair from another country since you don't have one yet there. And that person will lead your VCG and they'll give you exercises. What your group needs will change over time. For instance, in the land of Zoom now, after many months of COVID, my group is just hungering for the one-on-one intimate connections that they say they get so much just in these brief conversations during the bio breaks or during lunch or afterward. I always do a happy hour afterward, even if it's over Zoom. And so one thing I did recently is I set up a buddy system for new members. I also make sure that we have an exercise that includes breakout rooms where they're paired one-on-one or 3 or at most 4. So what your group needs over time will change, but be responsive and ready to pivot. You get to be creative. That's one of the joys of this work. Yeah.
Yeah, and Janet is very creative. And Shimshon, do you have any questions? And then Omer, and we'll conclude the hour shortly. Any questions for her about Vistage? Shimshon and I have just started talking, as I have with Omer.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm impressed with what I've seen so far. And Janet, you did an amazing job at your presentation. And the kol hakavod, as they say in Hebrew, in Israel, which means all of the honor. So, when you were talking about the value, it's true that the value that you add, we have a board of directors. Why should we go to Vistage? It's very, very true that the motto should be, the last stop before the board meeting should be the Vistage meeting. We're like, Vistage is like the makeup artist before the wedding, you look beautiful, but let me just, get the makeup out for you. Very good. And, it's true that as an advisor, I know also, based on the numbers I'm seeing, the value, the charge that you guys, have, or the membership fee rather, a person could spend a lot more getting to similar results and a lot more time, a lot more money and a lot more time going through the lawyers, the advisors, the consultants, and they're not always available, accessible, etc. But so my first question is, what is the average length of time that members stay on board? How many years? Because that's also marketing. In marketing, that's another, statistically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you have that statistic, that's another way of helping when in recruiting.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me answer the tenure question first. The average length of tenure, I believe, is I've heard most 7 years, and considering that it's a month-to-month arrangement with a 90-day notice, I think that's extraordinary. That speaks to the continued value that people get. You may hear figures around 5.5 years, but headquarters will be able to give you the current statistics on that. But it's one thing to give the statistic, but I think having them ponder that flip side of it, where this is not a long-term annual commitment. You know, you're not signed on for life. When I do interview people, I do ask them for at least a year's commitment. It makes them come in to play hard and be responsible for their experience. I made one early mistake in bringing on a founding member. We were in the final interview, and he leaned back like king of the kingdom and said, "Yeah, we'll give it a try, see how it goes." And I had a build coach there in the room with me. And I think I was a little more courageous about it at the time, but I said, "Wow, you know, Steve, I think I can tell you exactly how it's going to go. You won't come in to play hard. You know, if you want to see how it goes, then it's not going to go well. So if that is your final answer, then this is not a group for you. But if you want to come in and actually make better decisions faster and really be present and committed for at least a year, then the invitation is still open." And he joined, but I was unsuccessful in, I was seeing him not as engaged as the other members. And I worked with him during our coaching sessions on that, and other members tried to engage him more. And it was just a bad ad. I had the red flag right there in front of me. I'm kind of glad I'm telling you this story now, because it really illustrates the whole warm body thing. That's somebody you don't want in the group. Later on, you might be able to give somebody a chance like that when you have an established group dynamic and a much larger group. When they get dropped in that sea of high performing people, they may go, "Oh, there's a different way of being. I get it." But this was a group of 8, and it wasn't powerful enough to change him. I want to be sure you guys know about some of the other things. So they have the group meeting experience, they have their one-to-ones, but they also have this tremendous group of networks. Do you know about that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
share that Vistage networks, yeah.
All right, so a high-performing group will also take aspects of their issues to a network if it's very industry specific.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I
Omer, do you have a
belong-
question? Yeah, Shimshon, go ahead.
Yeah, I belong to a group in New York called Tiger 21, and they had very similar advantages as well. It's a place where, you know, and this leads into my next question, also what you just now spoke on. I was going to ask what percentage of leads sign up, and you know, in these groups, no matter what type of CEO you are and how many hundreds of people or more you rule, in this setting, a Vistage setting, you need to humble yourself. And I wonder, I'm only in Israel now 4 years, but I'm sure some of the Israelis on the team would answer this question maybe even better than you. You know, Israelis know everything, and you know, I'm a consultant to myself. How do you think I became CEO? You think I'm stupid? You know, so it's everyone. It's a hard enough sell, but now you're selling a very tough mentality, Israeli mentality.
Yeah,
And
let's
to
let
tell them, hey,
Janet answer, because we need to conclude our meeting. So Janet, and we want to go to Omer and then conclude. Yes, any thoughts about what Shimshon just said?
Yeah, you can actually flip that script and use it to your advantage. They like to give advice. So one of the key components here is they will get information from world-class speakers like Boaz, And it will enable them to give more powerful advice. They will be more influential and exact more of the type of change that they want. And you can also tell them that they're going to have ample chance to give suggestions to their peers. There's a format you follow. You know, you don't ask questions and embed your suggestions at that time, but every time at the end of issue processing, there is a time for suggestions, and that will be immensely satisfying for them. They'll also relearn what they knew as children, which is how to be curious and open to learning new things and open to other suggestions. They'll be able to honor their peers by hearing their suggestions too.
Absolutely. Omer, do you have a question for Janet?
Yeah, actually, we are running out of time, I believe, and everybody has to jump up into some other things. So I just wanted to thank you, Janet, so much for sharing your experience with us and for spending time with us. I had a few questions related to member acquisition and the member retention. How do you keep on adding value to these guys and keep the stickiness and keeping people enjoy coming back 1 month after the other? But it wouldn't be fair to jump up with this kind of question or set of questions at the end of the session. So only one quick one. How long did it take you to build your first group, and how long did it take you to build the second one? Just quick answer, if you may. Thanks.
Yeah. Let me think. The training is done in 3 phases. So you start building after the first, and you become better at the building as you go through the second and the third training. So I finished the first training in January, the second training at the end of May. I started really building in earnest in May, and I launched my group in October. I also had a disturbing family event that I had to tend to, and an illness that slowed my progress down by perhaps 2 months. Vistage probably has some statistics on the build and how long it generally takes. I can tell you that your build coach at the end of training will be able to help you get past any points where your efforts are flagging and you're not seeing results. Okay, there is no one right way to build a group. For instance, some people are really great at cold calls and building the top of their funnel. Other people are really great at the final interview, and they have a higher close rate. So there's no, it's just like anything else that you do in life too. Concentrate on what you're good at, delegate the rest as much as you can. Some chairs, including me, periodically will hire somebody to do the cold calls and get us those appointments with the people we value talking to. Nobody can close your stuff for you, though. One of the most powerful closing conversations, I think, has to do with the value of the decisions that they make. And it helps you get the kind of members in there that you want. If somebody questions the cost and making that back, you can ask them a simple question, use any numbers that you want. But so in your work, in your daily life, are you typically making $1,000 decisions, $10,000 decisions, 50,000, sometimes 100,000? What are generally the value of your decisions? Well, if you're looking at a price tag per year of under $20,000 for Vistage, with one better decision, you're going to pay for your membership. That's exactly how it works. And it takes a leap of faith for people to join a group like this. But if they can reflect on the value of the decisions that they're making on a regular basis and the kind of input they'll get from their fellow peers and from speakers and the value of the coaching sessions, they can make that leap of faith a little better.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Janet, I know that everybody here is gaining tremendously from your insights. May I share your email address with people in case they have additional questions for you? May I do that with them after the meeting?
You may. I will say I have a family member who is in her last weeks, and family is giving her round-the-clock care. The movie just premiered Friday, so there's a lot of activity around that also. So yes, I'd be honored to hear from any of you, but please be patient if I wait until the weekend to answer you, okay? And one thing I would suggest is asking about attending an Experience Vistage event just to watch it. Those are, you can learn about that. I won't, just ask about Experience Vistage and see if you can attend an issue processing for candidates. Okay.
We will find out about all of that, Janet. I cannot thank you enough for being with us. Any comments? By the way, just to let everybody know, we're making the final revisions on the agreement, taking in your insights, and we'll send those out this coming week. And then we ask that you get them signed up, because we need to do that in order to get Chair Academy rescheduled. And any comments by anybody before we close for today?
Janet, you're amazing. It was a great session. Love your energy and your determination.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Anita and I greatly appreciate your time and your insights. We really do. Any other comments from anyone before we go for today?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Thank you very much.
all of you. And we will see you all next Monday when Gadi Pollack is our guest. Janet, the chair from Houston, who is from Israel originally. So we will see you all next Monday at 5. And you all have a good day. We will follow through on Janet's great ideas. Janet, thank you so much for everything. We appreciate you greatly. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Thank you.